The needle buzzes like a trapped hornet against the silence of the basement. It is 3:14 a.m. The air smells of green soap, rubbing alcohol, and the metallic tang of fresh blood. You are staring at the skin on the upper back of Alejandro Vargas, the man they call El Verdugo, the executioner. He is sitting backward on a heavy leather chair, his massive arms folded over the headrest. He hasn't moved a muscle in 4 hours. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't bleed like normal people do. His skin is tough, like leather left out in the desert sun. Your right hand is gripping the rotary machine so hard your knuckles are stark white, completely bloodless. Your left hand is stretching his skin flat, the black nitrile glove slick with a mixture of ink and sweat. You are tattooing a saint on his back, a massive, intricate Santa Muerte, the angel of holy death. The shading on the cloak is perfect. The line work is as clean as a surgical incision. You have been his personal artist for 4 years, and you know the rule. Everyone in the compound knows the rule. With Alejandro, there are no revisions. There are no cover-ups. There is only perfection, or there is the ground. Your vision blurs for a fraction of a second. You haven't slept in 36 hours. Your lower back is a knot of white-hot agony from leaning over his frame. You wipe away the excess ink with a paper towel, your movements mechanical, rhythmic, practiced. Buzz, wipe, stretch, repeat. As you dip the needle into the small plastic cup of obsidian black ink, the rhythmic vibration triggers something in your brain, a sensory anchor. Your mind slips backward, pulling away from the immediate terror of the basement, drifting back to the night your life permanently changed, the night you met the monster. It was a Tuesday 4 years ago. You were running a small, legitimate shop in a quiet corner of Culiacan. It was midnight, and you were locking up the front display case. You were good at what you did. You weren't just a tattooer, you were an artist. You studied classical Renaissance anatomy, shading, and lighting. You treated skin like a canvas for fine art. That reputation is exactly what doomed you. The bell above the door didn't ring. It was cut. 4 men walked in. They didn't look like the street thugs who occasionally asked for cheap teardrop tattoos or crude block lettering. These men wore tailored tactical jackets, expensive boots, and earpieces. They didn't say a word. They just stood by the door, blocking the exit, their hands resting casually near their waistlines. Then he walked in. Alejandro wasn't loud. He didn't scream power. He wore a dark gray polo shirt and designer jeans, but the air in the room completely changed the moment he stepped across the threshold. The temperature felt like it dropped 10 degrees. His eyes were the color of stagnant river water, completely flat, devoid of any human warmth. He walked straight to your drawing table, looking at your sketches. He flipped through your portfolio with large, calloused fingers. "You did these?" he asked. His voice was a low, gravelly rasp, like stones grinding together at the bottom of a well. "Yes," you whispered, your throat instantly dry. He turned his back to you, pulled his shirt over his head, and tossed it onto your waiting chair. His back was an absolute mess of scar tissue, bullet entry wounds that healed into jagged craters, long silver lines from machete slashes, and old, faded prison tattoos done with guitar string needles and bootleg ink. "Fix it," he said. He didn't ask about price. He didn't ask if you had time. "Make it an empire." You didn't say no. You don't say no to a man who travels with a 4-vehicle convoy of armored Suburbans. You set up your station, your hands shaking so violently you dropped your first box of needles. But the moment the machine turned on and your hand touched his skin, the muscle memory took over. You spent 9 hours that night turning a crude, faded snake on his forearm into a hyper-realistic viper that looked like it was bursting through his flesh. When you finished, he looked at it in the mirror. He didn't smile. He just nodded once, put his shirt back on, and walked out. An hour later, one of his men walked back into the shop. He didn't give you cash. He threw a set of keys on the counter. They belonged to a high-end apartment in the exclusive part of the city. "You work for the boss now," the man said. "Close the shop. If anyone else touches your needles, we cut your fingers off." Just like that, your life was liquidated. You became a ghost with a singular, terrifying purpose: to ink the history of a cartel onto the skin of its ruler. The machine buzzes you back to the present. You are working on the intricate filigree around the saint's crown. Your hand is steady, but your mind is still racing, cataloging the horror you've witnessed over the last 4 years. To survive in Alejandro's inner circle, you had to learn to become invisible. You had to see everything and react to nothing. You became a human fixture in his safe houses, sitting in the corner with your sketch pads, waiting for him to call you for the next session. And because you were invisible, you saw exactly how he earned his name. You remember the second year. You were brought to a secure warehouse near the border. Alejandro wanted a new piece on his chest, a black and gray Aztec warrior. But that night, the session was delayed. A local distributor named Mateo had been caught skimming. Not a lot, just 3% of the monthly product from the local routes. He thought he was smart. He thought the volume was too high for anyone to notice a few missing kilos. They brought Mateo into the center of the warehouse, his hands tied behind his back. He was weeping, begging for his family, promising to pay back 10 times what he took. Alejandro didn't even look up from his phone. He was scrolling through news articles. "Mateo," Alejandro said softly, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Do you know what happens when a machine has a rusty gear?" "Please, boss, please." "The machine slows down," Alejandro continued, standing up and walking over to him. "And I don't like a slow machine." Alejandro didn't pull a gun. He didn't use a knife. He grabbed a heavy, industrial iron crowbar that was leaning against a nearby forklift. He didn't strike Mateo in the head to end it quickly. He systematically, methodically broke every single major bone in the man's legs and arms. He did it with the precise, rhythmic swing of a carpenter driving nails into wood. Crack, crack, crack. There was no anger in Alejandro's face. There was no sadistic pleasure. It was pure, cold utility. He was fixing a problem. When he was done, and Mateo was nothing but a broken, breathing mass on the concrete floor, Alejandro turned to his men. "Clean the floor. It's dirty." Then he turned to you, pointing at his chest. "Get your ink ready. We are wasting time." You spent the next 5 hours tattooing over his heart, while the smell of iron and copper from Mateo's blood still hung thick in the unventilated warehouse air. Your hands couldn't shake. If your needle went too deep, or if your line wavered because of the screams echoing in your head, you knew you would be lying on that same concrete floor. You learned to dissociate. You forced your mind to treat the skin like paper, blocking out the man it belonged to. You wiped the ink away again. The Santa Muerte is coming alive on his back. The skeletal face is sharp, the hollow eye sockets filled with a deep, velvety black that creates an illusion of endless depth. You think about the third year, the year you realized there was absolutely no escape from this labyrinth. A rival faction had tried to hit Alejandro's convoy in the middle of the city. It was a chaotic mess of high-caliber gunfire and shattered glass. Alejandro survived without a scratch, but his younger cousin, a boy named Santi, whom Alejandro was grooming to take over the financial logistics, took a round to the neck. Santi died in the back of the armored vehicle. 3 days later, after the massive, lavish funeral, Alejandro called you to his private estate in the hills. He was sitting in his study, surrounded by expensive bottles of scotch he hadn't touched. "I want his face," Alejandro said. He pointed to his ribs, right over his lungs. "Right here, exactly how he looked before the world ruined him." He handed you a photograph of Santi when he was 16 years old, smiling at a graduation ceremony. You worked for 14 straight hours on those ribs. The rib cage is one of the most painful places on the human body to receive a tattoo. The skin is thin, stretched tight over bone, moving constantly with every breath. Normal men cry, they scream, they ask for breaks every 30 minutes. Alejandro sat completely still, staring out the window into the dark courtyard. The only sign of pain was the tightening of his jaw muscle whenever the needle dragged across his sternum. Halfway through the session, his lead lieutenant, Rodrigo, walked into the room to give a report. They had found the men who coordinated the ambush. They had them secured in a basement across town. "Do you want me to bring them to you, boss?" Rodrigo asked. Alejandro didn't turn his head. He kept staring out the window. "No. Call their families. Tell them to choose one child to live. The rest, burn the houses with everyone inside. Let them watch it on video before you finish them." Rodrigo didn't hesitate. Yes, boss. You kept tattooing. You had to shade the soft curve of Santi's cheekbone in the portrait while listening to a man order the complete erasure of entire family trees. The contrast was sickening. You were capturing a memory of love and grief on the skin of a man who was simultaneously projecting absolute, merciless destruction across the state. Your needle moved with micron precision, balancing the gray washes perfectly, because you knew that if you messed up his dead cousin's face, your body would be burned alongside his enemies. The memory fades, and the stark reality of the basement slams back into your consciousness. It is now 4:45 a.m. The coffee you drank hours ago has completely worn off, leaving a bitter, acidic taste in the back of your mouth. Your eyes are burning from the harsh, direct light of the adjustable LED lamp clipped to your workstation. The glare off the wet skin is making it incredibly difficult to see the subtle variations in your gray wash. This tattoo is the most complex piece you have ever attempted. It is a masterpiece of dark realism. The Santa Muerte holds a scythe in one hand and the globe in the other. The cloak is supposed to be woven from intricate, microscopic lace patterns, transitioning into heavy, dark smoke at the base of his waistline. Alejandro shifts his weight slightly. It's a subtle movement, but to you, it feels like an earthquake. How much longer? He rasps. 2 hours, boss, you say. Your voice sounds thin, hollow, unrecognizable to your own ears. Just finishing the detailing on the scales of justice in her hand, then the final highlight passes. Make it perfect, he says. This is the shield for the war coming tomorrow. The pressure drops on your chest like a lead weight. The war coming tomorrow. You realize this isn't just a tattoo. To his superstitious mind, this is spiritual armor. If he wins tomorrow, you are a god to him. If he fails, or if the tattoo is flawed, he will look for someone to blame for the bad omen. You breathe out slowly through your nose, trying to lower your heart rate. You dip the 3-round liner needle into the darkest wash cup. You need to pull a series of perfect, continuous lines to define the chains holding the scales of justice. The chains are tiny, each link no larger than a grain of rice. Your hand moves toward his skin. A sudden, sharp cramp fires down your right forearm. It's a cumulative protest from 4 years of gripping a vibrating metal cylinder for 12 hours a day, combined with the sheer exhaustion of this 36-hour stretch. Your index finger twitches violently. The needle jumps. It happens in a millisecond, a fraction of a millimeter. But to an expert eye, to a perfectionist, it is an absolute catastrophe. Instead of a clean, curved link for the chain, the needle drags sideways, tearing a jagged, thick black line straight through the delicate, smooth, negative space of the saint's skeletal hand. The line is dark. It is deep. It is an undeniable, unfixable smear of black ink across a flawless canvas. The air in the room instantly vanishes. Your heart stops dead in your chest. The sweat on your forehead turns ice cold. You quickly lift the machine, but the damage is done. The black line sits. There, bleeding slightly under the top layer of skin, screaming at you like a siren. You try to mask it. Your brain goes into a manic, hyper-focused panic. Can I turn it into a shadow? Can I extend the bone? Can I add another chain link? But you know you can't. The geometry is completely ruined. The symmetry is broken. The negative space that gave the hand its skeletal definition is gone, choked out by an ugly, dark mistake. You wipe the area with a paper towel, hoping by some miracle of physics that it's just surface ink. It isn't. The paper towel comes away stained with red blood and black pigment, revealing the jagged mistake in sharp, brutal clarity under the LED lamp. Alejandro is hyper-attuned to the rhythms of your movement. He knows the cadence of your breathing, the specific sound of the paper towel wiping the skin, the micro-pauses in your work. He notices the sudden, dead silence of your machine. He doesn't move his head, but his muscles tense immediately under your left hand. "What was that?" he asks. The tone is quiet. Too quiet. It's the same tone he used with Mateo in the warehouse. "Just adjusting the depth, boss," you lie. Your voice cracks. It is the biggest mistake you could have made. The crack in your voice is an immediate confession. Alejandro doesn't wait for you to explain. He doesn't look in a mirror. He reaches back, pushes your hands away with a sweep of his massive arm, and stands up. The motion is so sudden it knocks your light stand over, sending it crashing into the concrete floor. The room is instantly cast into dim, chaotic shadows, illuminated only by the faint light from the hallway door. He walks over to a large, full-length mirror mounted on the concrete pillar. He turns his back to it, craning his neck to look over his shoulder. You stand frozen by your workstation, the rotary machine still buzzing weakly in your right hand, hanging by its clipcord like a dead pendulum. Alejandro stares at his back in the mirror for 5 long, agonizing seconds. He spots the line immediately. The jagged black mark stands out against the smooth, masterfully shaded gray wash like a scar on a fresh coat of paint. It completely deforms the hand of his holy protector. He turns around slowly to face you. His expression hasn't changed. There is no rage. There is no screaming. There is only that flat, stagnant water stare. "I told you," he says softly, stepping toward you. "This was my shield." "Boss, I can fix it," you stammer, backing up until your spine hits the supply cabinet. Bottles of ink rattle behind you. "I can turn it into a dagger. I can shade it out. I can make it look intentional." "You lied to me," he interrupts, his voice dropping an octave. "You said you adjusted the depth. You knew you failed, and you tried to hide it." He reaches into his waistband. The movement is practiced, completely natural. He pulls out a sleek, black, semi-automatic pistol. He doesn't cock it. It's already chambered. You look down at the barrel of the gun, then up at his face. You realize with an absolute crushing certainty that your 4 years of perfect service mean absolutely nothing. Your artistry, your discipline, the sacrifices you made, the ghosts you carried for him, all of it is erased by a single millimeter of misplaced ink. In his world, a flawed tool is a useless tool, and a useless tool gets thrown away. "You were a good artist," Alejandro says, raising the weapon to eye level. You close your eyes. The last sound you hear isn't the sound of the gun firing. It's the steady, monotonous buzz of the tattoo machine in your hand, still running, still waiting for the next line you will never get to draw.